Hello traders, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at the VWAP indicator, what it does and how to use it effectively. We're keeping things as simple as they should be because trading is simple. No need to overcomplicate it. VWAP calculates time and price, showing the average price for the day in our case. Now, I don't use many indicators because most of them show the past, not the future. But this is the one indicator I do use, and for a good reason. You really want to learn this because almost every millionaire trader I know uses just support and resistance lines and VWAP. They don't even use trend lines. Now, trend lines are great, but the reason they don't use them is that they trade stocks that don't trend as much. Basic principles of VWAP. A simple way to think about it is, if we're below VWAP, we're weak. If we're above VWAP, we're strong. Now let's look at our first setup. Today, we'll do something different. We'll talk about micros and use them as an example of how to trade these setups. We'll also go over how to scale into trades. And if you think you can't make money with micros, you're completely wrong. The main difference between minis and micros is that with micros, you'll likely stay in trades longer and manage losses better. The downside, you'll miss some big fast money trades, but if you're new and want better control over losses while avoiding tilt, micros are a great tool. Micro trading, rules and basics. We're not recycling shares here. We're taking the same setups we would with a single mini, but with micros, we have 10 contracts to work with. Here's the rule. Starters with 3 micros, 30%, adds the remaining 7 micros, 70%. When the trade is working. This way, when you're wrong, you only lose with 30%, but when you're right, you try to win with your full size. You won't always get to 100%, and that's fine, because the goal is for the trade to start working before you reach full size. You'll understand this better when you start applying it. VWAP short setup. We're heavy. We've stayed under VWAP, so we wait for a bounce toward VWAP to take our starter position. This means we enter with one bullet, 30%. You can also scale in smaller, say 10% at a time. Are we panicking if price swipes over VWAP? No, why? Because we only have 30% in, and we're watching what it does. The remaining 70% is in reserve. Now, where would you add that 70%? And where would your stop be with that 30%? My stop would be at previous resistance, and I'd add under VWAP. Remember, always pay yourself. Cover into washes, then add back if you like. Once you master this, greed can creep in. But remember, you can always add back what you just covered. You can hold bigger size lower or even target a fantasy cover, but at least cover something. Here is another VWAP short setup. Think for yourself. How would you use your starter and add now? Why micros? If the market is too volatile, micros let you adapt to conditions. If you keep getting chopped out with minis, it might be time to trade micros instead. All these setups are from yesterday's trading day. I haven't cherry-picked a perfect day. These are real-world scenarios, showing that you can find setups every single day. VWAP reclaim setup. Here's what we're looking for. We swipe over VWAP and start holding above it. Shorts get trapped trying to fade VWAP. We take a 30% starter. If price pulls back to VWAP, we add the remaining 70%. But what if price doesn't pull back? Then we assume we're right and may add 50% instead, keeping the last 20% in reserve for a strong confirmation near VWAP. Now, when do we pay ourselves? At least 40% of our position on the first push. We keep 40% to see if the move continues. Now look at this chart and think, what would you do? A pullback to VWAP is possible, but we have a good average on our remaining 40%. I'd add 40% back here and leave 20% for VWAP. I'd sell some at previous highs, keeping the rest for a bigger move. But why sell here? Because it's the second leg. Remember from the last video, the third leg is where it might be time to start looking for shorts, if there is weakness. Let's look at a different day. Can you recognize the setups? Yes, it's the same setups, but slightly different. Here's what you need to understand. No setup works 100% of the time. Every setup has variations. The problem is that trying to learn setups by only watching someone show you variations would take hours, and that's overwhelming. If you're new, it doesn't matter if you trade ICT setups or these, you need chart hours. The best way to learn trading? Just trade. When you're in the trade, super focused on price action, you'll memorize how price moves. The reason I'm showing you these variations is so you don't jump between setups after just 2 trades. Trading isn't about trying something twice and expecting to get rich. You need to develop a deeper understanding of setups and variations. Now let's get real. You probably watched a YouTube video that promised you'd make $5,000 in a week with some easy setup. A 10-minute video, a few candlesticks, and boom, life-changing money, right? If you seriously think you're going to make a lawyer's monthly salary by watching a single 10-minute YouTube video, you are so wrong. And worse, you're getting scammed. That's not how trading works. If it were that easy, everyone would be rich. If you're serious about trading, stop looking for shortcuts. Learn the setups, understand their variations, and put in the chart hours. That's the only way you'll ever get consistent payouts. Let's look at another day. This time we reclaimed VWAP but failed. Why didn't we push higher? How can we recognize when to take profits and get out? Draw a trend line on the highs. Said we started making lower highs. There were a lot of sellers above VWAP. It turned into a long trap, a great short setup. Trading isn't about memorizing perfect setups. It's about learning price action and adapting in real time. Let's move on. Now, notice something. I didn't draw any support or resistance lines on the last setup. Why? Because I wanted you to focus on price action. If those lines were there, you just rely on them. Now, you're probably looking at this day and thinking, this is just chop. VWAP isn't working. Yeah, not every day looks like a perfect textbook setup, but this is exactly why we talk about variations. And now, you'll start to understand why. So, let's apply what we've learned in the previous videos. What do we always do first at the start of the day? We figure out our support and resistance levels, and where do we get those from? Past data. Look at this level. It has acted as both support and resistance before, meaning price respects it. Now, check VWAP. Would you go long or short here? If you had this level drawn beforehand, you wouldn't be panicking. You'd see that this is actually a great short setup. Multiple rejections and longs getting trapped after trying to buy a VWAP reclaim. We've built a strong tool set to trade profitably, without any magic indicators. As I said at the start, most millionaire traders only use support, resistance, and VWAP. No need to waste time on mumbo-jumbo. Learn price action, trade, and build consistency. The reason why we also use trend lines is that NQ tends to trend, and trend lines help us identify key movements within that trend. They provide structure to price action, allowing us to spot pullbacks, breakouts, and trend reversals more effectively. That's it for this one. If you found this helpful, hit that subscribe button for more content like this. See you in the next one.